Today's lesson will open up Chapter 9 on food and agriculture. I will be using a PowerPoint produced by some former students. I think it's pretty strong and will serve well. The chapter is split into 4 different units. Key Issue 1 will cover where did agriculture originate. Key Issue 2, why do people consume different foods. Key Issue 3, where is agriculture distributed? And lastly, Key Issue 4, why do farmers face sustainability issues? Again, this key issue will focus on where agriculture originated. First, let's break down what agriculture is. Humans have utilized Earth's surface for survival and economic gain by cultivating crops as well as domesticating animals. The origins of agriculture is unclear, but geographers have a better understanding of where the hearths are in the world, of where agriculture started, and how this agriculture started to diffuse over time. The agricultural revolution is said to have began 8,000 years ago, where we first started to see populations grow rapidly. There are 2 types of factors that may have contributed to the agricultural revolution: environmental factors and cultural factors. Under environmental factors may have happened roughly around the same time as the Earth's last ice age, and so this freed up more land to be cultivated. It also allowed humans the option to grow food due to climate change. For cultural factors, you have a permanent settlement that becomes preferred for living. So rather than people hunting and gathering and being nomads, they preferred to stay in one place. Also, in disregarding seeds, humans began noticing plants sprouting where the seeds dropped. So these types of experiments or these types of natural processes also allowed for people to understand that they could remain in one spot by continuing to cultivate the same crops. This led to humans beginning to experiment with seeds in different types of environments. Many scientists disagree on where the exact hearth of agriculture began, but they do agree on where the hearths are in multiple places at different times. Let's look at what a few of these hearths were able to produce. Southwest Asia, for example, is one of the hearths, and 12,000 years ago they domesticated dogs. 10,000 years ago, the earliest domesticated crops were thought to be barley, wheat, lentil, and olive. 8,000 to 9,000 years ago was their most important contribution, domesticating cattle, goats, pigs, and sheep. East Asia is known to have domesticated rice. In sub-Saharan Africa, 8,000 years ago, sorghum was domesticated. Sorghum is a cereal grain. Yams may have also been domesticated even earlier in this region. Millet and rice could have independently been domesticated in sub-Saharan Africa, separate from its original hearth, which was in East Asia. Latin America is another hearth, and 4,000 to 5,000 years ago, beans and cotton were domesticated in Mexico, and potatoes were domesticated in Peru. Maize or corn also may have domesticated in Latin America, but the origin date is unknown. Please spend some time looking at Figure 9-2 located on page 309 of your textbook. You will see the multiple hearths here, as well as the different types of crops that were first cultivated there. There are 2 types of agriculture you want to be familiar with: subsistence agriculture and commercial agriculture. With subsistence agriculture, this is primarily common in less developed countries, and it's where farmers are producing crops or domesticating animals for their own survival or for their own family. Commercial agriculture, on the other hand, is mainly conducted in developed countries, and it's used to generate profits and to sell to a market. It's important to note that even though subsistence agriculture is more common in developing countries and commercial agriculture in developed countries, you still see both present in all countries around the world to some extent, just one to a larger degree than others. These are the two types of agriculture. They vary in where, why, and how they are practiced. Let's go ahead and look at some major differences between the types of agriculture. This is really important when you're describing the agriculture. So, for subsistence, this is practiced in developing countries, produced to feed a family. They happen to be smaller farms. There's little to no machinery. A greater number of farmers are needed to produce the food that is cultivated on the farm, and a much higher percentage of farmers. This means that the ratio of farmers to land is going to be a lot higher, meaning that a smaller amount of land but a larger number of farmers. With commercial farming, this is practiced mostly in developed countries, produced for the sale off of a farm. There's also going to be a huge amount of farmland. Most of the labor will require industrialized machinery, but there will be a much lower percentage of farmers to the land. Please take some time to look at the map located on page 310 of your textbook. This is going to be figure 9-3, and it's going to show agricultural workers. As you can see here, we are looking at the percent of the labor force engaged in agriculture. It is a lot darker and higher in developing countries and a lot lower and lighter in developed countries. This should indicate to you that subsistence farming is much more common in Africa and Asia, and commercial farming is more common in North America, Western Europe, and Australia. Machinery, science, and technology will also look very different between developed countries and developing countries. When looking at developed countries, you're going to have a small number of commercial farmers that can feed the population due to innovative machinery. This includes tractors, combines, corn pickers, planters, and other machines that make farming a lot more efficient. New fertilizers, herbicides, hybrid plants and animal breeds, as well as farming practices, leads to more healthier crops and animals. In addition, the use of GPS can help larger farms know where to place certain crops and monitor their grazing animals. Developing countries, on the other hand, because they cannot access this often very expensive, innovative machinery, will rely on hand tools and animal power so they can produce a lot of their food. They rely on traditional equipment like old wooden or iron plows pulled by oxen, or hand tools like hoes and shovels. They also lack the access to farming science and technology, and this can serve as a limitation to farmers and subsistence farmers. Looking at the map on page 311, this is figure 9-4, and it indicates the area of farmland per tractor. Farmers practicing commercial agriculture in developed countries have more hectares of acres of land per tractor than do farmers practicing subsistence agriculture in developing countries. The machinery makes it possible for commercial farmers to farm extensive areas, a practice necessary to pay for the expensive machinery. Farm size will have much to do with the difference between commercial farming and subsistence farming. Commercial farms are much larger, and subsistence farms are much smaller. As a result of large size and high levels of mechanization, commercial agriculture is an expensive business. Farmers have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy or rent land and machinery before beginning operations. Farmers often borrow money from banks and end up repaying that money after their output is sold. Commercial agriculture in the US is dominated by a handful of large farms. Interestingly, in the United States, the largest 5% of farms produce 75% of the country's total agriculture. As you can see, many of the circumstances that developing countries are in make it very difficult for them to attain the same advantages that developed countries have when it comes to commercial farming. This is the end of Key Issue 1. Some highlights from the text include: before the invention of agriculture, most humans were hunters and gatherers. Agriculture was invented in multiple parts beginning approximately 10,000 years ago. And modern agriculture is divided between subsistence agriculture in developing countries and commercial agriculture in developed countries. They differ according to the percentage of farmers, use of machinery, and farm size. Again, this is the end of Key Issue 1. Stay tuned for a video on Key Issue 2.